Standing by. Turn.
You're listening to the Go Lightly Martial Hour on freedomtalkradio.net. freedomtalkradio.net.
Alright, we are on air with show 171, which is
the length of the Shroud of Turin
in
inches.
Alright, today is Friday, the 14th of November 2014, from the home of the Christ. Brian
I'd like to
Leonard.
sing happy birthday to Prince Charles.
Oh, of course. Oh, yes. Oh, well. We'll have to find who did
it's
that
his
video.
Last birthday. What do you expect?
Yes, yeah. Who did that? I'm thinking about the one of Elizabeth being flushed down with the suitcases. Somebody did it. Was it Joel or? Yeah. No, it's old
You're going
now.
to say I've seen it, but I haven't seen it.
You have seen it.
No,
It's at least 3 years old.
Say that.
Yeah, it's at least 3 years old. Joel, it's one of his first ones. Or it might even be Chookas. We'll find that again and we'll just remind everybody. It's about Elizabeth being flushed down the toilet to the bottomless pit. Anyway, let's move right along to more important things than the end of the British Royals and the Jews that control.
Well, it's all controlled by the European Union now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, nobody's talking about it though, but anyway.
Well, naturally they're not going to talk about it because the British be up in arms.
All right, who's going to answer 5 questions that Chris sent?
Yes, a
Last
lot of people
week.
will still die.
4 questions. Is everyone going to die?
Not everyone. You've got to take on the garment. That's what it's all about. I've been yapping on about it now for 40 years. And I've got a few followers that actually know what I'm talking about now. So you're one of them. Now, this is a judgment time. This is not...
Redemption.
Redemption. People are on the foolish notion that the Bible is the Word of God, which it isn't. And that... you are saved by grace, which you aren't. You're saved by works. Now, it's all set up because this is all demonic control. The Bible is basically a demon entity because men are very susceptible to becoming demonized. It's very easy to do. But what they aren't susceptible to is righteousness. Now, you get in a position of power, especially if you're a translator of ancient texts, you go off the party line and you're out of there. You'll never get a job again. So therefore, anything that's translated has got to be highly suspect because of the demonic influence. And where does the demonic influence come from? Well, you all reincarnate, as does the demons. It goes back to the flood. The flood was all about getting rid of the demons off the earth. And then the reincarnation of those demons keep on occurring. So they become so bad that they had to be eliminated. Now, many things changed due to the flood. Gravity changed, for example. There were giants in those days. Well, of course there were. Some people are 20 to 30 feet tall because of the gravitational field was so low. But after the impact of Mars, and the huge amount of water, the more massive a planet is on the surface, the greater the gravitational pull. And also the iron core at the centre of the Earth was spinning very quickly. So think of it being on a child's merry-go-round in a little park somewhere, and you're sitting in the middle of it. You're the iron ball in the middle of it. But move towards the edge, you start to accelerate outwards. And the gravity gets higher and higher when you get out to the circumference of this thing, might be 3 or 4 metres across. So, does that explain it to you? You're getting very, very heavy as you get out towards the surface. Likewise, once the iron core was slowing down, which is huge, by the way, once it slowed down, so it's almost at a crawl now. But before it was spinning very, very quickly, and therefore you're being thrown off in the sense of the gravity effect, because it's all a matter of magnetism. So you are all north-south pole, all your atoms in your body are north-south pole. That's why when you are on a planet, you're stuck to the surface, right? You're pulled towards the centre of the Earth, right? I can guarantee if you had a hole drilled down to the centre of the Earth, you jump in, you're not going to stop halfway down. You're going to keep on accelerating until you hit the centre, if that was possibly physically done. Of course it isn't, but mathematically you could say it is. You could do it. So the further out you go, the lighter you get, because you're getting further out. Now it's an interesting thing that we found in the actually, I should go back a little bit. How I was trying to locate, we was doing, as this is the 171 show, and the Pope has recognised me by being the face on the Shroud of Turin. And of course my body is exactly the same as the Shroud of Turin, and I still have the scars of the Shroud of Turin. There's a mountain on Tahiti, which is the same number as the area of the Shroud of Turin, 7353 feet, which is 7353 square inches. And there's also a mountain on, I think it's Adams Peak, on Sri Lanka, which is also the same number in feet. Now Sri Lanka is unique. There's 16 rivers there that have a total, an average of 8.8 miles. It might be kilometres, I think it's miles. I think it's a British system when they did it at that time. So in other words, creation is what it's all about. And then you've got how it all fits together with the same numbers that keep on cropping up. And what I was looking for is what my body weight is on all planets out to Saturn. And 3168 was 31.68 astronomical units was the distance from Jupiter to all of the planets out to Saturn. So you got from the Sun to Mercury to Venus to Earth to Mars to Saturn. The distance was a total of 31.68 astronomical units when I was born. That's a unique thing, because these big huge planets are moving very, very slowly, and they don't line up like that again. But what they do have in common is a gravity. So what I was able to determine years ago was that the man of my body weight, 222 pounds, and I've always been that weight since as an adult, and if you add them all up on the gravity of each planet, like for example, don't quote me on this, but I think it's 586 pounds I would weigh on Jupiter, for example. So Saturn is like 208, and it goes down as you get into Mars, smaller planet, Venus, smaller planet, the Earth 222, of course, and then the Sun was over 6,000. So in other words, you add all those numbers up of my weight on all these planets, and it is the same number as the area of the Shroud of Turin. So the area of the Shroud of Turin becomes feet, becomes inches, becomes this, becomes that, and it's built into the structure of the Earth, which wouldn't be made known to you unless the Shroud of Turin had been discovered, and of course all the controversy over it. And then
yes, always trying to debunk.
The best thing they ever did was do the carbon dating, because they took a piece of the cloth that was part of the stitched in area,
the restoration
after
of
the
it.
fire, and what was it, 1582 or something, No, it's a different date. But it was the 4th of December. Okay, so we line it all up. We got the 4th of December. That's King James. It's King William the Lion of
It was
Scotland.
1182, wasn't it? Wasn't it 1182?
1504 or something.
Was it
Doesn't
that late?
matter.
Yeah,
Come
yeah.
on, by that.
Yeah.
It's the point I'm trying to make here, and you're going off on a bloody tangent. So, we've got the area of the Shroud of Turin becomes infamous because they took a piece of cloth that had been meticulously stitched together. It was an art they did in France at the time. They could take a torn cloth, and then with their ability, with the new magnification glasses they had out of Germany, they were able to wind the original linen with the new cotton, and then they dyed it to make it look like an original piece. So they cut that piece out. Now, all of the protocols that was arranged for the testing through 3 different laboratories, I think 1 in England, 2 in the US, they all become financially rewarded afterwards. One guy in England, I think it was, he got £1 million new laboratory because he had done what the Jews wanted. So, as stupid as this all sounds, the thing you must never do if you're going to do any research whatsoever, you must never have a Jew involved. Because a Jew is not a human being in the sense of what you are. They are demonic. They are infiltrated at birth by demonic spirits that are where the flood, pre-flood people that had taught cannibalism and war and all sorts of wondrous things that we find today, we're rediscovering because humankind has gone downhill ever since. And it's only in the last 100 years that with the masses of people, you were able to get a genius pop up now and then, like Edison or Newton, for example, to bring forth information that collectively, once you're exposed to it through the Freemason Jew universities, you can then put that to war or to put to building things that are seen today as being a wondrous invention. But most of them come out of war, like a computer comes out of the war machine. The computer was developed, I think, by the Lion Corporation in England. And the idea was to, if you fire a bullet in any direction, if you fire it east-west or west-east, the distance from the gun at the same trajectory will be different. Because the spinning of the Earth at the equator, mind you, 1,037 miles per hour. If you fire it northwards and it's in the air for 10 seconds, the Earth will rotate under it and then it will drop, and wherever it hits, if you fire south, it'll go the other direction. So they had to find out, and they calculated 10,000 different calculations. So if a tank was flying along in the desert, they could enter the configuration on a chart, and that chart would give them where to aim. In other words, if you're going to aim at a tank that's north-south of you, and you know the distance to it with your binoculars, because you get a focusing mechanism, not that hard to do in those days, then they say, all right, we've got to fire to the left and higher by 20 feet, or a degree, or something like that. That's why tanks would stop, then fire. Because they do all the calculations. While they stopped, however, they was very vulnerable to being hit. So it was, who cares? It doesn't matter if you get killed, right? Whether you're British or whether you're German or whether you're whatever nation you were fighting for, it doesn't matter. You sail over tank and bullets, right? It's great. Because the Jews are behind it. Rothschilds are all behind it all. Rothschilds are behind the wars in the United States, all of them. Everyone. How many wars has the US had?
Well, they brag about their involvement with the French Revolution.
That's right. So we got the Shroud of Turin, this miracle. And
Can I
then
just
the Pope
put,
recognises it.
Yes, and for the listeners, because this is really important, it was December the 4th, 1532. And 2 years later, it was, because you mentioned yesterday about the Clares, it was the Poor Clare nuns who restored it.
Yes, that's right.
In 1534. There's this amazing site. There are so many dates concerning hundreds and hundreds of dates. They've been able to track the path of the shroud for centuries.
Well, I mean, the guy that did the original photography on it was invited to go there by another Jew, So here you're letting the foxes in with the chickens, right then and there.
Yeah.
Now even the oldest, which is shroud.com, it's a Jewish site, and I've written to them many times. No response.
No response at all.
I'm telling them how to read the shroud. For example, the larger piece of shroud and there's a smaller piece of shroud.
Yes.
What the sizes are. For example, the face cloth. They used to bind the jaw shut because when rigor mortis after a couple of hours died off, the jaw would fall open. And they'd bind the head with that. So they had two pieces of cloth, and it's in the Gospels of John, I think, when they go to the
tomb.
To the tomb, and there is the two pieces of material. One is the shroud, and one is the small binding piece, which is later stitched onto the edge of the shroud. And if you look at the shroud closely, you can see that the image on it is off to one side by 8.88 centimetres, or 888 millimetre. The larger area is 39.5 by 171, and that area in Hebrew is teslim, which means an image, a ghost, a phantom, right, which is burnt into the bloody cloth. Right? So I have been trying to tell people for a long time all around the world, don't know what lessons are good, that the image on the Shroud of Turin is backwards. When my soul left through the blood, the spirit leaves, the ghost leaves from the cross, and it goes out of the body, the right hand becomes still the right hand, right? But when it comes back in, it comes in backwards. So when it comes in backwards, it means that it passed through the cloth first, because it's already gone.
From the outside. Yeah.
Now it's coming to the cloth, and it goes through the outside as it came out, backwards. Right? So here you are on the cross, you're looking straight ahead, the soul goes out from you, and it comes back in the same way. The only difference is now it's in the tomb. So all the residue of that, the blood and images and so forth, all came back as the soul manifests back into a flesh blood, because that's what happens, and the blood then goes back in and reforms within the body. Right? So that is why the body's clean, because on the cross it was a thunderstorm of tremendous ferocity which washed the blood clean, which then dribbled down into the upright hole, which held the upright stake, which was then an earthquake which cracked it, and all the water that was pouring off and washing the body clean. That's why it wasn't necessary in the cross, in the tomb, to wash the body. It was perfectly clean from the storm. You hang on a storm for an hour and a half, you get pretty clean. Right? So there was no blood left, so there was no more bleeding. It was only congealed blood that had been on the arms and so forth, and various parts of the body that had been there for a long time. When I say a long time, it congealed on the cross before the storm. And that didn't wash off. Right? So what you have then is a shroud with all this clean body showing every dumbbell on the end of the 6 leather dumbbells of stone, or rather bone, or lead. They used lead in my case, which was designed to tear the flesh off. And so you've got, as I said yesterday, you've got 40 lashes plus 6 times 2. That's how many hits you got. That's how many wounds there were. Right? So it was pretty ferocious. So clean body in the tomb, didn't need to be anointed, didn't need nothing. It was approaching the Sabbath, couldn't do it by law, subject to Jewish law. Now it's not Essene law, it's Jewish law. Right? Because if you didn't do what the Jews wanted you to do, they'd kill you anyhow. So the women, although were Essenes, had to obey the customs of the time, and that is why I had to die on a cross, because it was the stupidity of the Mosaic law where you could sacrifice animals, and that's why I was the last sacrifice.
Yes, the final sacrifice,
Final
which is what you told
sacrifice.
Caiaphas.
So I come to defeat the evil at its evil. Right? So here it is, the accumulation of evil was the Talmudic Babylonian mystery religion that dominated the entire Old Testament, which was the scriptures at the time. And that meant that in order to defeat it at its own level, I did exactly what it decreed should happen to me, which was to die on a cross and have the blood and the circumcision of the crown of thorns, and all the blood, the skin was removed. This is the female, and because it was a virgin birth, remember. In actual fact, when they did find the blood by Ron Wyatt, it's got X chromosomes in it. What's that mean? Female.
It had it had one human parent.
One human parent.
From the mother, 23 from the mother, X, and 1 Y from God the Father.
Right.
Instead of 46.
So, happy days. Now, although most of you out there are pretty thick, some of you have got it. Now, we get a lot of stupid comments anyhow. I'm still rejoicing in the fact that I can't get too many people to believe me, because if I did, the prophecy would fall over. Right? Why? Well, it's a rejection prophecy. So even in the time of sunrise or sunset to moonset on my birth is, for Sydney, Australia, 11th January 1944, is rejection. The rejection prophecy. So all you do is rejection, type it into the computer, see what it comes up with. And it comes up with Matthew 21:42, and Psalms 118:22. Now I've read, I think, in Psalms, now how many is there in Psalms? Well, it's 150 something. I've read 4 of them. What's that do? I've read 4 of them. How much of Matthew have I read? I think I've read...
You stick to the verses
6 or 7
that stick out.
In John, half a dozen plus the Comforter ones. I've probably read more than John than anything else. 2 Peter, I've read 2 verses. Leviticus 2. Genesis, maybe 8 or 9. That's because it's Genesis 49, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's all my name, 49, 10. That's why I read that.
So the bottom line is, unless it's about you, you don't want to read it. So the Word of God... No, exactly. I didn't.
So some of these things are angelic and most of them are demonic. So when you start reading your Bible, you make a big mistake. That's not what it's all about. You don't need to read Bibles. Once you believe in me and the hairy-fairy Jesus that comes out of your church, you might as well walk out of the church. As soon as they start yapping on when Paul said this, get up and leave. As soon as I said, Moses said, get up and leave. Leviticus, get up and leave. Unless they're talking about me being back on the earth, get up and leave. Get out of your churches. What's it mean? There is a verse in Revelation about that.
Come out of the whore. Come out of the whore, yes.
Now, complete lost track now. What was I talking about? Oh, Shroud of Turin.
The Shroud of Turin. Show 1 to 71.
So, I don't need to do a test to prove to anybody that it's my shroud. Right? Why would I bother? That's why I don't bother with reading the Bible. It's a load of crap. I know what it is and what it isn't. All I'm looking for is codes. Now, what I can tell you is how many times words are repeated and where they're repeated in what verse. Yes, I can do that. But so far as reading all of Ezekiel is a bloody abomination when you read it. It's a sexual abomination. Never seen anything like it. I only read 2 or 3 verses of it. I couldn't do any more. But it turns out that the abomination is Judah.
Now this is interesting. Let's
Ezekiel 23, if you're game enough to read it.
All right. This particular site, shroud.com, history, and it has all of the dates. As I said, there's hundreds of them from the 13th century, with every movement, where it went, who was exhibiting, whose control, who worked on it. But March the 30th, 2013, Pope Benedict XVI, in one of his last acts as pontiff, so this is before he withdrew to Castel Gandolfo, authorises a television-only exhibition of the Shroud of Turin directly from the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin. This is the first such exhibition in 40 years, since the first ever TV exposition of the Shroud on November 23rd, 1973. And then it goes on to say, newly elected Pope Francis makes the first comments
What was the date
of
in
his
73?
23rd of November. Newly elected Pope Francis makes the first comments of
What
his
was it in March?
November, March 30th. This is the one last year.
That's the display, March 30th, right?
Yes, this is when, let me finish this. Newly elected Pope Francis makes the first comments of his papacy on the Shroud of Turin just hours before it airs on television. This is when you can read about Pope Benedict's announcement that the letter from Sister Maria verified. Pope Benedict had she said, we had recorded the video announcement of the return of Salvator Mundi that was to air with this exhibition that went to air on RAI TV March the 30th, 2013. This is when Benedict, first of all, found out that his video recording had been cancelled by the Antichrist Francis, and he got so upset and was so very angry. It was also the moment that he realized that he had indeed become the prisoner of the Vatican. And it was that night, as the exhibition went on, and in his words, the same as Sister Maria, that Francis recorded some useless deal. The message was some useless deal where he had cut off the public TV announcement, Salvator Mundi in Brian Leonard Golightly Marshall. It was that night, March the 30th, 2013, that Pope Benedict and Giuseppe in particular, worked feverishly to make what he could, since they didn't have any video equipment. They couldn't get any audio out to us, but he was able to put together a PowerPoint of the events that led up to this night, where indeed Pope Benedict had become a prisoner of the Vatican, and it was the cancelling of the public announcement on RAI TV.
Well, we told him it's gone. We're the one
No,
that told him. Yes.
the exhibition went ahead. We knew nothing about his announcement. It was a surprise.
Not the announcement.
No, well, that's what I'm talking about. It was the announcement.
Look, just a second here. We were looking at the dates that this thing was going to
yes, we were communicating.
And it was changed.
It wasn't changed at all. It went ahead. What had changed? It was a surprise because Benedict didn't know that it was going to air on March the 30th. You can read the transcript. They hadn't been told. That's when he phoned RAI TV.
We told the Pope.
Yes.
He phoned the bloody
Yeah, we told the Pope that it was 4 minutes to the beginning of the showing. You can read the transcript of it.
Yeah, the Pope didn't know.
No, he didn't know it was going to be aired.
That's what I just said. Hello. Everybody who heard what I said, please write in.
But it went ahead as planned. The program was going ahead as planned. But what had changed was the video recording that Benedict had made to announcing. And he said it was a surprise for you, remember?
Yes, it was.
The announcement was a surprise, but of course it didn't go. And it was Alfred Zurich, the personal secretary of Francis, that phoned RAI and cancelled it. So for people out there, why haven't we heard about it? Well, the announcement was made. It was recorded and it was cut off by the Antichrist, who is Francis.
Well, I'll take an apology anytime. Pretty.
Well, no, the programming didn't change at all.
Move on. We remember what you said.
And then all these other things that have happened around it. On May the 4th, 2013, opens... this is Nosiglia. The Archbishop of Turin opens a month-long celebration dedicated to the Shroud on the feast day of the Holy Shroud with a concert and a mass. May 23rd, 2013, the death of Maurizio de Assia, Prince of Langravio di Assia Castle, firstborn Prince Filippo di Assia Langravio, Savoy. Oh, this is the House of Savoy, and Princess Mafalda di Savoia. He was one of the persons King Umberto II of Savoy designated executor of his will regarding the Holy Shroud of Turin. And then May the 24th to 25th last year, experts from around the world gather in Mexico City, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes down to December the 25th last year, 2013, which is what we covered last week. December the 4th, it's announced on this date that Pope Francis has authorised another public exhibition of the shroud in 2015. All these learned scholars.
He won't be there, I can tell you that.
Well, he has publicly accepted that he will. He will
Not
go.
if he's dead.
Ah, well, there you go. No, that's a... Yes. That's a different matter.
You'd argue with Christ, you would.
I do all the time.
In fact, you are.
I do all the time.
As my stepfather used to say, you'd argue with Christ, you wouldn't.
Yes.
These little kids say you aren't.
And...
What else? You're reading some dates there?
Yes. How far back do you want to go? The first date is from 1300s. Highlights of the Okay, so this is the highlights of the undisputed history. April the 10th, or 16th it says, 1349, the 100-Year War had been raging between France and England for over 11 years, and the Black Death had just finished ravaging most of Europe when Geoffrey de Charny, a French knight...
Chardonnay.
Oh, it's written here Charny. That might be somebody else. A French knight writes to Pope Clement VI, reporting his intention to build a church at Liry, France. It is said he builds St. Mary of Liry Church to honour the Holy Trinity, who answered his prayers for a miraculous escape while a prisoner of the English. He is also already in possession of the shroud, which some believe he acquired in Constantinople. So in 1355, according to the De Arcis Memorandum, written more than 30 years later, the first known expositions of the shroud are held in Liry at around this time. Large crowds of pilgrims are attracted and special souvenir medallions are struck. A unique surviving specimen can still be found today at the Cluny Museum in Paris. Reportedly, Bishop Henry refused to believe the shroud could be genuine and ordered the expositions halted. The shroud was then hidden away.
Well, that's where the devil's coming in again.
Yes. Then September the 19th, 1356, Geoffrey de Charny is killed by the English at the Battle of Poitiers during a last stand on which he valiantly defends his king. Within a month, his widow, Jeanne de Vergy, appeals to the Regent of France to pass the financial grants formerly made to Geoffrey onto his son, Geoffrey II. This is approved a month later. The shroud remains in the de Charny family's possession. August the 4th, 1389, a letter signed by King Charles VI of France orders the bailiff of Troyes to seize the shroud at Liry and deposit it in another of Troyes churches, pending his further decision about its disposition. August 15th, the bailiff of Troyes reports that on his going to the Liry church, the dean protested that he did not have the key to the treasury where the shroud was kept. After a prolonged argument, the bailiff seals the treasury's doors so that the shroud cannot be spirited away. September the 5th, 1389, the king's first sergeant reports to the bailiff of Troyes that he has informed the dean and canons of the Liry church that the cloth was now verbally put into the hands of our Lord the King. The decision has also been conveyed to a squire of the de Charny household for conveyance to his master. Then in November 1389, Bishop Pierre de Arcis of Troyes appeals to anti-Pope Clement VII at Avignon concerning the exhibiting of the shroud at Lyre, he describes the cloth as bearing the double imprint of a crucified man, and that it is being claimed as the true shroud in which Jesus' body was wrapped, attracting crowds of pilgrims. January the 6th, 1390, Clement VII writes to Bishop de Arcus, ordering him to keep silent on the shroud under threat of excommunication. On the same date, Clement writes a letter to Geoffrey II de Charny, apparently restating the conditions under which expositions could be allowed. That day he also writes to other relevant individuals, asking them to ensure that his orders are obeyed. June 1390, a papal bull grants new indulgences to those who visit St. Mary of Lyre and its relics. May 22nd, 1398, the death of Geoffrey II de Charny. He is buried at the Abbey of Froidmont near Beauvoir, his tomb decorated with his effigy as a knight in armour. In 1400, Geoffrey II de Charny's daughter Margaret marries Jean de Beauformont. June 1418, the widowed Margaret de Charny marries Humbert of Villers-Sexel, Count de la Roche, Lord of Saint Hippolyte sur Doubs. 1418, July the 6th, due to danger from marauding bands, the Lyre canons hand over the shroud to Humbert for safekeeping. He keeps it in his castle of Montfort near Montbard. Later, it is kept at Saint Hippolyte sur Doubs in the chapel called des Boissarts. According to 17th century chroniclers, annual exhibitions of the shroud are held at this time in a meadow on the banks of the river Doubs, called the Pré du Seigneur. 1438, the death of Humbert de la Roche, husband of Margaret de Charny. May 8th, 1443, the Dean and Canons of Lyre petitioned Margaret de Charny to return the shroud to them. May the 9th, 1443, the Parliament of Dole gives judgment on the case of Margaret de Charny versus the Lyre canons. July the 18th, 1447, the Court of Besançon gives judgment on the case of Margaret de Charny versus the Lyre canons. So it went on for years, 4 years later. And then 48 to 49, the archives of Mons record Margaret de Charny as Mame de la Roche, with in her care what is called the Holy Shroud of our Lord, entering Mons and ordering French wine there. 1449, Belgian chronicler Cornelius Zantiflet records Margaret de Charny exhibiting the shroud at Liège. 1452, September 13, Margaret de Charny shows the shroud a Gematria near Macon in a public exhibition at the castle. 1453, Margaret de Charny at Geneva receives from Duke Louis I of Savoy the castle of Varambon and revenues of the estate of Mirabel near Lyon for valuable services. Those services are thought to have been the bequest of the shroud. 1457, Margaret de Charny is threatened with excommunication if she does not return the shroud to the Lyre canons. On the 30th of May, the letter of excommunication is sent. 1459, Margaret de Charny's half-brother, Charles de Noyers, negotiates compensation to the Lyre canons for their loss of the shroud, which they specifically recognise they will not now recover. The excommunication is lifted. October the 7th, 1460, Margaret de Charny dies, leaving her Liary lands to her cousin and godson Antoine Guéry de Assas. February the 6th, 1464, by an accord drawn up in Paris, Duke Louis I of Savoy agrees to pay the Liary canons an annual rent to be drawn from the revenues of the castles of Gaillard near Geneva as compensation for their loss of the shroud. This is the first surviving document to record that the shroud has become Savoy property. The accord specifically notes that the shroud had been given to the Church of Liary by Geoffrey de Charny, Lord of Savoy and Liary, and that it had then been transferred to Duke Louis by Margaret de Charny. In 1465, Duke Louis I dies at Lyon. Just over 2 decades later, a chronicle of Savoy will record his acquisition of the shroud as his greatest achievement. He is succeeded by his son Duke Amadeus IX, an inactive but devout prince who has a Cordelia as preceptor and who shares with his wife, Duchess Yolande of France, a particular devotion to the shroud. Amadeus is said in 1502 to have instituted the cult of the shroud in the Sainte-Chapelle at Chambray. Yolande founds Chambray's Poor Clare's convent, whose sisters, in a few decades' time, will repair the shroud after the chapel fire. However, Amadeus neglects to honour the terms of Duke Louis's agreement to pay an annual rent to the Liary canons. Then April the 21st, 1467, Pope Paul II elevates the status of the Chambray Chapel to a collegiate church. 1471, beginning of the second phase of construction of the Sainte-Chapelle at Chambray. And then the shroud was transferred, this is interesting, September the 20th, 1471. Shroud was transferred from Chambray to Vercelli, 1471, pregnant within the womb. 1472, the death of Duke Amadeus IX, 1472, Philibert I, the Hunter of Savoy, succeeds his father as Duke at the age of 6, although his mother, Dowager Duchess Yolande, assumes the role of regent during his minority. May 14th, 1473, 2 delegates from the canons of Liary press Regent Yolande for 8 years arrears in the promised rent, or, in place of this, the return of the shroud to them. So July the 2nd, 1473, the shroud was transferred from Vercelli to Turin. Okay, Vercelli to Turin. October the 5th, 1473, the shroud transferred from Turin to Ivrea. July 18th, 1474, the shroud transferred from Ivrea to Moncalieri. August 25th, 1474, the shroud transferred from Moncalieri to Ivrea. October the 5th, 1475, the shroud transferred across the Alps from Ivrea back to Chambray. My God. Then 1477 to 78.
There is one point, however.
What's that?
My age on March in 2013, March 20th.
March 30th. March
30th.
30th, yeah.
69.18, which is God.
Of course, babe, of course. All right, so this is all very interesting. It moved backwards and forwards several times in a year, and then a couple of years breaks in between. Oh, here we go. So it was moved around with the Savoys, and then June the 11th, 1502, at the behest of the Duchess of Savoy, Marguerite of Austria, the shroud is no longer moved around with the Savoys during their travels, but given a permanent home in the Royal Chapel of Chambray Castle. Duke Philibert, Duchess Marguerite, Francois of Luxembourg, Viscount of Martigues, husband of Louise of Savoy, granddaughter of Duke Louis, together with nearly all the local clergy, attend the ceremony of translation, during which Laurent Alamand, Bishop of Grenoble, solemnly carries the shroud in its silver gilt case from the Chambray Franciscan Church to the Sainte-Chapelle. The shroud is displayed on the chapel's high altar, then entrusted to the care of Archdeacon Jacques Veyron and the canons of the chapel, who place it in its case and deposit it behind the high altar in a special cavity hollowed out of the wall. In this cavity it is secured by an iron grille with 4 locks, each opened by separate keys, 2 of which are held by the Duke. Pope Sixtus IV confers on the Chambray Chapel the title Sainte-Chapelle. Then there was an exposition on April the 14th, 1503. It was Good Friday. There was a new casket for the shroud, is created in silver by Flemish artists. This is in 1509 at a cost of more than 12,000 gold écus. The shroud's installation in this new casket takes place on the 10th of August, before the Sainte-Chapelle's grand altar, in the presence of the presidents of the Council of Savoy and other dignitaries. In return for the gift of the casket, the Sainte-Chapelle chapter are required to say a daily mass for Marguerite and her dead husband Philibert. 1511, private exhibition for Anne of Brittany, Queen of France, and for Francesco of Aragon. 1513, death at Chambray of Marguerite's mother-in-law, Dowager Duchess Claude. She is buried behind the high altar of the Sainte-Chapelle, Chambray immediately facing the repository containing the shroud. 1516, King Francis I of France journeys from Lyon to Chambray to venerate the shroud after his victory at Marignan. A copy of the shroud preserved in the church of Saint Gomer at Lierre is dated to this year. 1518, an exhibition. 1521, Duke Charles III marries Beatrice, daughter of King Emmanuel of Portugal, in this year. Make a pilgrimage to Chambray to venerate the shroud. The death of Marguerite of Austria in 1530, and then December the 4th, 1532, fire breaks out at the Sainte-Chapelle, Chambray, seriously damaging all its furnishings and fittings. Because the shroud is protected by 4 locks, Canon Philibert Lambert and 2 Franciscans summon the help of a blacksmith to prise open the grille. By the time they succeed, Marguerite of Austria's shroud casket reliquary, as made to her orders by Levan van Latham, has become melted beyond repair by the heat. But the shroud folded inside is preserved, bar being scorched and holed by a drop of molten silver that fell on one corner. April the 16th, 1534, Chambray's Poor Clare nuns repair the shroud, sewing it onto a backing cloth called the Holland cloth. and sewing patches over the unsightliest of the damage. These repairs are completed on the 2nd of May. This is interesting. That's the date we sat in the Vatican. And last year, 2013. Covered in cloth of gold, the shroud is returned to the Savoy's castle in Chambéry. So the shroud himself was sitting in the office of the Vatican, being interrogated by them, called upon to wait, and then as we're walking out the door, a phone call comes from upstairs, and the guy says, un momento, please, come back, un documento, and they take photocopies of our passports, and I gave them telephone number and address of where we were staying.
Waiting for him to show up with an attempt to kill us, huh?
Yeah, well, I tell you what, the helicopters started overhead from that point on. All right. Yes, so they repair with the backing, the Holland cloth, sewing patches over the unsightliest of the damage. These repairs are completed on May the 2nd. Covered in cloth of gold, the shroud is returned to the Savoy's castle in Chambéry. Then in 1535, Savoy is invaded by French troops. Charles III and his family abandon Chambéry. The shroud is taken to Piedmont, passing through the Lanzo Valley. And then May the 4th, it's the birth of Tracy. In 1535, the shroud is exhibited in Turin. So we've got a whole bunch of measuring from these dates to do.
Well, I've done a few, but
yeah,
it all says the same thing.
All right. Well, okay. So this is the shroud history, and it goes on and on. It is one well-travelled shroud.
Yeah, it's amazing how they move it around. Now, in all that time, it hasn't been disintegrated or whatever.
No.
And now they're trying to preserve it in an argon-filled cage.
Glass case.
Because if right, it might disintegrate, all rubbish.
Now, May the 9th, 1606, because this is just days before the declaration of Fernandez, Captain Pedro Fernandez de Quiros. Yes, which was May the 15th, 1606. So on May the 9th, 1606, there's a public showing. The crowd swelled by 40,000 foreigners who had come to Turin to see the shroud. And yet when we were there, couldn't get in, could you, babe?
Yeah.
No, you're allowed into the museum, which they charge.
The crown of thorns.
And not allowed to go and see unless you're a higher up of the church.
Or a homosexual.
So in 1608 there was the 30th anniversary of the shroud's arrival in Turin. A print issued to mark the occasion is preserved in London's British Museum. We'll have to, when we take over, have to collect all of these memorials to the shroud.
Use it for a hall runner.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about all the memorials that have been struck down through the centuries. What else is interesting? The shroud exhibited.
Don't walk in with muddy feet, wiping on the shroud as you're coming in, right?
Ooh.
What?
On May the 4th again, this time 1647, at a public showing this year held in the cathedral, some of the enormous crowd died of suffocation.
Yeah, so many people in there, huh?
So their crowd control wasn't very efficient, was it?
Well, they never expect such huge volumes of people.
I understand that. However, you know, a little bit of crowd control goes a long way in controlling.
It's all word of mouth, didn't make it up. Sydney Morning Herald.
That's right. Exposition of the shroud in the Cathedral of Turin is delayed from the normal May 4th date to coincide with the wedding of Duke Carlo. This is in 1663. Duke Carlo Emmanuel II of Savoy with Francesca de Orleans. The copy of the shroud preserved in St. Paul's Church, Rabat, Malta, was placed in contact with the shroud at this time.
Okay, so all that dribble and all that running around and moving about.
Yes.
The important thing is the Pope recognised me on it.
Yes.
And it is the highest mountain in Tahiti.
Yes.
And it's the height of Adam's Peak, I think it is, in
Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka, which has 16 rivers that average 88.8 miles long.
Yes.
Now, I measured from there to where I was born. It was also about the shroud. In miles or kilometres. I've done all that.
I know, I'm uploading it all to the Facebook page, all the drawings.
Well, if you're going to upload all these drawings, then there's thousands I've done. There's 30. Of the modern bitmaps, there's about 3,500.
Yes, yeah. Now, I'll explain that. This is the first part from the Canadian leg of your journey. And then you had the 13.13 years of all of your drawings while you were with Michelle.
That's right. And of course, she was another demon of another type. It should explain that Mary Magdalene was a demon. She actually caused the crucifixion, which was all set up. I mean, I manoeuvre people. Right? I'm not going to lounge around. I get things done. And if I need to, I'll either get you to do it by agreement, or if you want to go the other way, which is the best witness, is the one that tries to stab you. Right? So in a court of law, you get one lie out of a witness. The judge throws a whole testimony out. Right? Catch me out, it ain't going to happen. So whether I care or not, whether people believe it or not, don't make any difference to me. I'm taking over, that's it. Not an election.
Well, all right, explain the lead up, the run up to the crucifixion, the days. What was the event that brought it about, and how did Mary cause it?
Well, the woman taken in adultery was brought to. I mean, people claiming to be the Messiah in those times, they were everywhere. Right? There's all sorts of lunatics doing it, right? Virgin births, all sorts of people caused come along so they got virgin, because that's the prophecy. However, no one could prove it. But being caught in adultery from a man's point of view, so what? You know, you look at the Old Testament, and we've got Judah, right, and Tamar. She's the one who was in trouble, not him, right? And on it goes. So men flopping about with any tartle on the street, doesn't matter. A woman doing it, it's death penalty, stoning, Moses' law. Right? So here's old Jesus laying there, running about, doesn't matter, doing like condemning the Jews every chance I got. And this particular day, the crowds were gathering, and they brought a woman caught in adultery. And that woman, of course, was given to me to judge.
Why you?
Well, because the one that was caught in adultery with it was me. Right? It was Martha, the sister of Mary, and Mary had, in the Essene law, if a woman couldn't conceive within 3 years, you go back to being. But in my case, I had to produce an offspring. And as the crucifixion's coming up, it was necessary to move to the younger sister, the one that I loved anyhow. This is the old story of like Rachel, Rebecca, and all this kind of stuff. And because Mary, being a very vicious woman, didn't like it one bit. So being caught in adultery was Lazarus at his ear to the ground, right? And
the younger brother of Mary and
Martha.
Martha.
You and me. Was also your brother.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So he was a Pharisee. Right? So at that time, the word got out. Next thing, your Martha is taken by the crowd of Pharisees from the Sanhedrin, from the top of the men down. They want to get me big time, right? And they want me to condemn you so you can get stoned to death. So I simply said, drawing on the ground as I usually do, very calm and collected.
And what were you drawing? Tell the world what
Pyramids and circles and all sorts of stuff like that. And stars, you know. And naturally enough, I look up and I say, well, who hasn't sinned be the first to cast a stone? Well, that floored him, right? And in the original story, he was knocked out by a stone because Mary threw it through the crowd, right? Because she hadn't sinned, right? No, the reality
That's
was...
his Jesus joke.
They wanted new stones.
Well, of course.
Right? Why? Pregnant.
Pregnant.
They didn't want the line to continue, right?
No.
And that's why you had to go with Joseph of Arimathea back to Cornwall where the family came from.
And that's... So now, the book of John, who wrote the book of John?
Martha.
Hello. Bringing the story up to today, when I...
Well, that's why you read it and you recognise it. I've never read it.
Well, just a little bit of history, because if there are Christians watching... look, I went through the whole ball and wax, you know, the born again. It's a joke, right? However, this is my journey, the journey of the soul, because I had to find the Christ on the earth, which I did. But it took time. It would have been really good if we'd all had the roadmap from the beginning. This is what you've got to go through, blah, blah, blah. But even, I mean, Yah had...
You did all the work, right?
Yes. And the point is that Yah had that moment in time when he was 6 years old. Well, first of all, he had himself speaking as God, as a small child. This is the one who is the remnant and the seed of the woman who obeys the commands of God. It's not anybody else on the planet. The revelation is a personal note to self when he's on the earth back here. This is what it's all about. But myself as Martha, I did not have a clue who I was. So I went through the church route of becoming the born-again Christian, etc. But what it did, because I was seeking God with all of my heart, I was told to start reading from the book of John. Well, I did. I open up the Bible because I'm told it's the word, so I start reading and devouring it. Well, I immediately placed myself there, and I remember the first time I went to a very small gathering. They would call them Christian Home Fellowship. I mean, it's all so funny now. It was a Wednesday night. I phoned the pastor and I said, "Look, I've given myself to the Lord. I know you've got a home cell group on. Where is it? I'll be there tonight." That very first night that I was there, I was a total stranger in their midst, and he was a pastor of, he was an old man, and I began speaking to him, first of all, about faith and about the Word from John, and I was placing myself in there and began revealing the scriptures from that very first night, which was kind of astonishing. They all looked at me like, how did I, who just walked into their midst, have the wisdom that I had? Well, it just came naturally. But I still didn't understand, because the teaching of the reincarnation of the soul has been removed from the Christian psyche altogether. So I didn't think of myself as anybody, except that I hungered and thirsted after the truth. And Isaiah 53, the words of Isaiah resounded within me always. Well, that's because, as Jesus, of course, his teachings were from the scrolls of Isaiah, etc. So anyway, that's all part of my journey, but I had no knowledge. I did not know who I was until I found him, and even then within days. I had been accused of being Martha, because I went from one country to another to pack somebody up, move their house, to create a better life for them, maxed out the credit card, and it was a railing accusation against me. Sit down, Martha, because I wanted to get about doing the work. And this is, of course, from the one who thought she was Mary. Of course, it was all part of the DVD that, because it was all about me. It wasn't about her. That's right. But it was, as it turned out, it was all about me. But I did not even go there to think about it. And then, of course, when I found him, he said, "Well, you're Martha." I go, "Well, of course I am," because in the lives of everybody that was around me, family and friends, I did the work. Didn't matter what I was called.
I dropped the clues. You still didn't get them, man. No.
Oh yes, you the emails. Well, these are the scriptures, and then
you still got the emails?
That went with.
Michelle's got them.
Oh well, good. She's got the record. No, my email shortly after that was hijacked, taken, shut down, everything gone. So that's what it's all about. We are all now. This takes us right back full circle to Chris's first question. We didn't answer the others that he had. Is everyone going to die? Well, not everyone, but a lot are, because they haven't made it. Their soul has not reached the perfection that he talked about on the night of Nicodemus coming to him at night time through fear of the Jews, the same Jews that would kill the Essenes if they found out they were Essene, Jesus being an Essene. Now, Chris's second question, this is all relevant because you've got to bring yourself past what everybody's reading about in the Bible is his story, history. Today, everybody on the planet is back for the judgment, so it's the sorting and sifting, really, of where everybody goes upon the death of the body. So Chris asks, how did Jesus help people and feed so many with only a prayer? Now, what needs to be understood at that time is that these things that happened then were for that generation. There was no technology to bedazzle anybody with and measure the creation to prove it to everybody. It's like being in the Stone Age and trying to explain motor vehicles and aircraft. How do you explain it? So in those days, these are the signs and wonders that did happen. The angelic realm moves to respond to God, to bring about miraculous healings, the walking on water, those kinds of things, but not for this evil generation who seeks a sign. So many signs have been given in the heavens and upon the earth in the measuring of the temple, and yet they still reject. So the next question of Chris is, how can I have that faith that he had? Well, I'd have to say to you, anybody who has found Yah and believes today, okay, you have the faith that he had, just like I had the faith to look for him. I looked for 9 years, purposefully on the earth, and so once I found him, I was vindicated. Now, a lot of you have not been looking for him, but you do stumble. You have stumbled upon the truth and you believe. Hello, that's your faith rewarded.
It's also preordained, right?
Yes, it is. I want to give what's left of my heart to him and serve. Well, Chris, just tell everybody through email. Use the technology through the email. Send the apostolic letter. Benedict has done it for everybody. You don't, if you want to add some of your own words of how you found him or whatever is your testimony and witness to who he is, send it.
Do you believe this is genuine? Send it out.
So that's all anybody is asked to do in this generation. And some of you are able, some of you are not. Doesn't matter. Just do. It's all ordained. Okay, with that, we're at the end of the show. It's been a ripping.
What, you haven't started?
Oh no, we're over time. But it's been a ripping yarn once again this morning, all about the shroud on 171. Show.
Yeah.
Say goodbye, dear.
Down in Nehemiah, there's just on the station, the main station in the camera. The sun goes past, it's all pink, giving off a pink glow.
Oh, really?
And also there's that little further away this time is the big gas giant planet.
Right.
That's in Australia.
There have been some amazing photographs captured from around the globe that people are getting of it. I think we'll go out today with American Trilogy, sung by Yah, shall we?
If you want
All right, let's do it. I'll pull the microphone out after I get it playing. Say goodbye. Talk to you tomorrow, guys. And later, Gators.
How I wish I was in the land of cotton. Good times there are now forgotten. Look away, look away, look away. I wish I was in the land of cotton. Good times there are now forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. His truth is marching on.
The Go Lightly Martial Hour on freedomtalkradio.net.